Hey everyone, welcome back to Talkin Shop with ShopSabre. Today, we're going to talk about the cost of cutting corners, why cheap decisions can destroy your business. It can destroy your profitability, and it can really just have a negative effect on you. But first, as always, I am your host, Brandon Bombardo, here with the weatherman, Nick Peters.
Hello, Brandon.
Hello, weatherman Nick.
How's it going today?
It's going well.
That's good.
Really, every business owner wants to save money. I think we can both agree on that.
Sure.
We talked to a lot of business owners, but there's a big difference when it comes between cost-conscious savings and cutting corners because you're cheap.
Very big difference.
Don't you agree?
Yes. And will have very big effects on your business.
Yeah, I mean, we all make business decisions. I think we all have to. And I think we all have to make business decisions outside of our business, right? A business decision is anything that has to do with our life, right? And if you buy on price alone, I think oftentimes it can come back and bite you. And a lot of times when it does it, it's a big bite.
Right.
It's often not a small bite. It's usually something that is pretty obvious.
And typically in a negative manner.
Usually in a negative manner, yeah. But yeah, I think, for us, today's episode is going to be more about breaking down how cheap decisions do affect you, and they can lead to costly mistakes later on, and really what you should be watching out for, and I don't know, just how smart investments can keep your business growing and keep you really profitable, especially during like challenging times. I think that's where it's easy to get frivolous with your spending when things are going well,
For sure.
because you're not watching the finances as closely.
And then if it gets a little slower, you're like, gosh, I wish I wouldn't have bought that
Correct.
$400,000 truck.
Right. And that's exactly what you think about that. Like in your life. I mean, when you find something like on Amazon or, and you buy that frivolous thing that you normally wouldn't buy, but because things are going well, you don't really care. But then as soon as you do care about, maybe your bills get tight, you're like, oh, I really shouldn't have bought that, extra scooter I didn't need,
Now I can sell it for half the price I paid for and I didn't even use it.
Right.
Try to get some of the money back.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly it. It puts you in a situation where you got to do that. But I know you, the viewers, you guys have sent us some questions. So before we jump into this week's episode, I want to talk about some of your questions first, and then we'll dive back into this. Like I said, we'll really get into the heart of this episode. So, Nick, I don't know if you want to start with the questions, and I'll fire off the answers.
I'll take it from here.
Cool.
Question number 1.
Yeah.
Preference on sealing your spoil board. Tape, wax, banding, paint?
Yes. The answer is yes. I like all of the options. I don't have a preference one way or the other. I tell people, do what you have available to you. I don't know that there's one better or worse than the other one. It's what's most convenient for you. But of course, sealing your spoil board isn't always a requirement. You don't have to do that. But of course, anytime you can reduce vacuum leakage, you're going to increase your hold down.
Sure.
And therefore, for me, I just like to get, a decently cheap spoil board material. I don't buy high quality material. Get the cheapest stuff you can. Go to Home Depot and ask for the cheapest stuff. And then you just fly cut the surface, top and bottom. And a lot of times that's all I do. I don't seal those edges. But when you're getting into things that require more strict hold down where it's smaller parts, then I do recommend doing a wax on the edge of the spoil board. The other thing that I'll do if I'm going to run a lot of sheets in succession, I'll actually silicone down my spoil board once in a while, just around the outside edge, just to create a little bead, to keep it from leaking anything out from there. It also helps if the heat and humidity in the shop changes, it's going to help keep it held to the table so it doesn't warp as bad, and I don't have to resurface as often then. And the nice thing about silicone is I can just use a razor blade, especially if you have the phenolic tabletop option. You just use a razor blade around the edge and it literally comes right off. So when you throw your spoil board away, so does the silicone, and you don't really have to do a lot of cleanup. So huge fan of that. I have never banded a spoil board, so I can't speak for that. I know there are people out there that have done it and had success, but I've just never done it. And then of course painting it, to me, I don't like paint. It's messy.
Does it actually seal enough to?
Yeah. I mean, you're clogging the pores.
Oh, that's fair. I saw that and was, I don't know, kind of surprised.
Yeah. I like wax. I mean, I think it's easy. Just put wax around the outside of it. So again, the whole purpose is just to clog the pores. So the air, because the air naturally goes to the area of least resistance. So.
Got it. Good.
Yeah.
Question number 2. Why is there no automatic tool changer on a ShopSabre 23?
Yeah, I saw this one actually. This was a conversation that went back and forth a little bit on our YouTube channel, talking about the 23 and, referencing how there's not really a machine in that size that comes with a tool changer, unless you buy from an import company. And we've investigated it and we've looked into buying or building a machine that has a tool changer at that level. But the real problem you run into is in order to use the components that we use, the machine becomes priced like one of the bigger machines.
Sure.
So that ends up being a driving factor why the demand falls off for the machine. So, for us to invest a lot of resources in developing a product that we don't see a lot of demand for, seems like a bad business. It's just not a good use of our resources, especially when you're trying to, give people what they need. We've considered going with some alternative spindle options, but we just haven't found anything that we're going to put our name on at this time. I can't say we won't find something here in the future. We won't continue to work on this, but at this time, it's just not something that's fit really our business model and what we're trying to do. So that's just, at this time, the auto tool changer, the head that we do sell is just far too big for the structural design of what we have at 23, and it just hasn't been something that fit at this time. So,
all right, moving on to number 3. I chose another brand. Would like to know your take on brand A versus your brand.
Yeah, actually, this question, we kind of talked about it before we went live on this, and I like that we called it Brand A because I don't want to talk about other brands on this. I'm just going to be honest. I'm not going to talk about their name. Obviously, the customer's comment had the company name, but I don't believe in bad mouthing it. I'm not here to tell you that the brand you bought, was a bad brand. I'm not here to try to act like, you've made a bad decision either. Everybody makes a decision for their own, and you have to figure out what's right for your business. And congratulations on choosing a machine. My goal and my hope is that one day you'll give us a shot. I do think when I compare ShopSabre to alternative brands out there, I feel like the people are really what sets us apart. Number one is you don't get our staff here. You don't get me. You don't get Nick. You don't get the people that work here at ShopSabre. And I know that you're going to say, well, yeah, I get Hank and Timmy and whoever else works at those companies. You're right, but they're not us. And there's one thing I've learned about my team here is they don't stop for anything. They will work their tail off for you. So that's the first and foremost thing. And I think our reputation kind of speaks for itself on that. I mean, we have a really good reputation for customer support and service. So yeah, I think that's a big thing. The other thing is we have never wanted to be like everybody else. We do things unorthodox sometimes, right? We do things that you just don't see commonly in the industry because we do it with the purpose of trying to be better.
Yep.
Not to say we don't fail, not to say we don't make mistakes, right? We do. But, again, I wish you would have chose our brand. Hopefully you'll give us a shot in the future because I do think there's a lot to be gained in owning a ShopSabre, specifically in our support. So, again, congratulations on your purchase. And, I'm sorry to hear you didn't buy from us, but yeah, I don't think there's anything to gain out of us beating up what you purchased. I don't think that's a good look. Obviously, I would have loved to do a comparison on what you were looking at and give you some technical facts, but at this point, you made your purchase, so I'm not gonna, be that guy. So
right, and I think, taking the high road on something like that gives them a reason if they do have to get a new machine or look at a different brand, like they'll want to come back and talk to you, right? If you don't like put off that vibe and give that attitude of like we're the best, we're better than those, but and kind of crap on other people. Well, is it going to give you a reason to come? There's certain things that people can say or the way they can act that are going to make you not want to go back and talk to them.
Well, yeah, that's fair too. I don't really think about that. To be honest, I just try to be who we are. And
I guess I was looking more from the customer's point of view. Like,
no, I understand. For me, I'm just more about like, again, I'm more disappointed that we didn't earn your business. Sure. I guess that's where my brain goes to is like, why didn't you choose me? Like, I would be more interested in that. And obviously kind of taking that off the record, I'd love for you just to call me and let's talk about it because I want to learn from it. Like, why didn't we win? Because then I didn't do something right. So, that's where I kind of look at it from is that we didn't do enough if we didn't earn your business. But I know sometimes it's just we're not in a position to earn your business. Sometimes we don't have the right product or the right price or the feature or something. But, I think for a large majority of people, we have the solution. And it's just about getting the right information in people's hands. So,
sure.
Yeah. Is that it for this week's questions?
That's it.
All right. Well, I appreciate you guys sending in questions. Obviously, every week the questions help us move things forward, and obviously it helps address some of your questions. I've never been afraid to answer them. So, moving on. Obviously talking a little bit about this week and the topic. One thing that we've talked about is the temptation of cutting costs, right? I mean, there's a temptation there to cut costs, especially when things slow down in your business or the world, let's just talk about it right now. I mean, there's a lot of instability worldwide. People are worried about tariffs and worried about all of this stuff going on in the world. And I think some of it's unnecessary worry, to be honest. I think it's just the media being the media.
Yeah.
And that's not a political thing. It's more of just the media in general. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are a fan of in politics. The media has always got their own agenda.
Shock value.
Right. It's a shock value. Like it's clickbait, right? We've talked about that. They don't get a reaction out of you, and they don't make money if they don't get you to tune in. So they've got to create some sort of story there. And the story, scare value always creates a better story, right?
Absolutely.
And so when you start talking about the temptation to cut costs and to really change your business, right? I mean, everybody wants to look at being more profitable, and either you have to sell more or you have to take costs out. It comes down to that. And, why a lot of businesses look at a cheap product, right? Or look at a cheap solution is a lot of times it's to keep overhead low, right? They're trying to bring their overhead down. I think overhead's always a priority in a business. So naturally you go there. The other reason why people look for cheap solutions is everybody wants a good deal. I know I do. I'm always looking for a deal on anything I can, because you kind of feel like you win when you get a good deal.
At first, for sure, yeah. Sometimes,
I just think
sometimes it's too good to be true, though.
Yeah, and that's a conversation we'll have on that, right? But I mean, the reality is we all like a good deal.
Absolutely, yeah.
We all want to feel like we win, and sometimes it's just hard to see the immediate impact of a cheap decision.
Yes.
Right? If I make a decision, I don't always think about how this decision can affect me in 3 to 5 months or 3 to 5 years. Right? Sometimes more. Here's the problem with a cheap decision, right? And making it a cheap solution even. Like when you come up with a cheap solution, it's oftentimes it's cheap because of the materials that go into the product, right?
Yep.
And oftentimes they fail faster. I mean, we've learned that over the years with, buying things from overseas and our personal lives, right?
Sure.
When you buy certain products and you go online and buy something for a fraction of the cost, it often is a fraction of the cost for a reason.
Correct. Yep.
And oftentimes being a fraction of the cost can cause you other things like downtime, right?
You get a fraction of the quality.
Fraction of the quality.
Fraction of the production.
Yep. And, poor quality parts do lead to poor results as well. And I think that's another downturn is that oftentimes when you get something that's built with some poor quality parts or, off-brand knockoff stuff, it's going to cause your customers to be unhappy. It causes some reject.
Yep.
Because once you've failed once, some people don't give you a chance to fail twice.
They just kind of assume that's going to be the norm.
Correct. And
first impressions are a key.
Some people say, fooled me once, shame on you. Fooled me twice, shame on me, right?
Correct.
And some people take that to heart. And I don't believe that because I think everybody's entitled to making a mistake. We're all human. If you expect perfect 100% of the time, you're going to probably be disappointed 90% of your life.
Yep.
But I do believe, though, that consistency is important. And a reputation is important. And if a product's reputation is consistently bad, it's probably a bad product. And so,
but if you're consistently really good and then you have one mistake,
correct,
10 times, obviously you're going to get a little bit more of a understanding there.
And that's where I'm at with it. Like I buy parts for my race car, and every part fails. I mean, I don't care what you're buying, every part fails. But consistency is it. And that, I look at like a fuel pump as an example. I bought a fuel pump for my car from a very reputable name. Because of their name. But a buddy of mine bought one at the same time, and his fuel pump failed. And a week later, my fuel pump failed, and it was the exact same failure in both parts. At that point, it's not a mistake.
Right.
It's consistently, right? It's a consistency thing. Like we both bought 2 parts at different times, but they failed within a week of each other. Like to me, that's a part quality failure.
100%.
And so that's where I kind of look at it as buying, we both bought it based on price. It was a cheaper product versus the more expensive fuel pumps we normally buy. And we both ended up losing probably the most important race of our season. Both of us.
It's a hard lesson to learn.
Hard lesson to learn, right? But I learned it really quickly, and now I will never do that. I'll spend the extra money and just end up with a better. But again, in the moment, as I consider buying a cheap solution, I didn't think about the fact that I could be in the biggest race of my life and running near the front.
And was the price difference
not enough?
significant?
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, no. Like, but
At the time.
but when you think about it was double the price.
Sure.
The fuel pump I normally buy is twice as much as the fuel pump I ended up buying. But when you look at the grand scheme of the things,
You would've gotten 5
we're not
times the life out of
talking
it.
we're not talking thousands of dollars, right? We're talking a few $100.
Sure.
It's like, yeah, so instead of spending 200, I spent 100, right? Or whatever.
And then you went and bought the more expensive one in the end anyway.
Exactly.
So.
I ended up spending more anyway. So, yeah. So, I think when you start to think about that and you start to think about skimping on things, like you skimp on other things outside of it, it's more than just the product, but it's the training and the support and things that come along with it that a lot of times can leave you stranded. And better support a lot of times keeps you productive. And in my case, fuel pump fails. I called in for support. They basically told me like, oh no, sorry, like it's out of warranty because it's 30-day warranty. Well, I bought the fuel pump, didn't even put it in the car in the first 30 days.
Used it once.
Yeah, I used it one race, and so it's just that's frustrating. So I think when you shop for a bargain, you tend to get a bargain
For sure.
right?
Yep.
You save money, but within a year, within some time period, right? You often find your flaws in your decision.
Typically, in the end, you're going to realize that buying the more expensive one that you probably wanted to,
Right.
instead of cutting that corner, would have been worth it.
Correct. Yeah.
Because now you just bought it anyways.
The other thing is, you have to think about the real world costs of a cheap decision. I think that's really where I want to go with that next is, one is the cost, right? Cost is always number one. Everybody looks at cost first. But what about your cost, right? It's the loss of production. What if you have a demand, you're back ordered? I mean, I have customers of mine I know that tell me that they're 3, 4, 5 months behind schedule. Can you imagine being 3, 4, 5 months behind schedule and then your machine goes down?
Nope.
Like, it's not going to help your...
You bought that machine to cut that down, right?
Right.
And now it's going to make it worse.
And now you add downtime, right? Because now you have guys standing... Do you not pay your team because your machine's broke down?
No, they're not going to be happy about that.
Right, exactly. You can't just be like, oh, sorry, Nick, your computer's broke today, so I'm not going to pay you.
And be like, well, you should have bought me a better computer.
Right.
I
Well,
will
and it's,
continue to, like that type of... I mean, that's what most people are going to say, right? Like you may
even that, but it's just like, are you going to work here long term if that's how I treat you?
No.
Right. You're going to lose good employees then because of poor quality equipment, right?
Yep.
And I think the other thing that people don't realize on that is cheap machines break down more often than quality machines, right? Yeah, it might cost you a little bit more money up front, but in the long run, you're down less, and less downtime translates to better profitability.
Correct.
So every hour of downtime, you have to figure out what does it cost you to run your operation for an hour. Well, if you're down for an hour, how much money did you just lose? Is that worth
A
it?
lot
to you?
more than that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, and then you talk about the poor quality and the reputation damage that you can cause, right? Because if you put out a part that doesn't live the standards of your customers, they're probably going to be questioning whether they'll give you the next job.
And that's probably going to be more damaging than like your downtime of a couple days not outputting anything, right?
Yeah, I mean, like in a CNC machine, if you can't hold tolerance, like what's good is the part that you're selling?
Zero.
It's not a square cabinet anymore, right? Like, so customers just won't trust you anymore. I mean, that's the problem. Once you break people's trust, like that's your hardest thing to overcome. I also think you have to consider that today's world, the world travels fast, right?
Immediate, really.
The world is moving at a speed that it wasn't before. So you can't afford downtime because a lot of us are working 7 days a week now. Like I remember Saturdays and Sundays in the, youth years. Like I remember being a very different world. Like you didn't expect places to be open on a Saturday or Sunday. Now you kind of like look down on a company when they're closed on a Saturday or Sunday.
Like, what do you mean it's 3:00 on Sunday and I can't come and buy something? Yeah.
Even me, I find it weird when restaurants aren't open on a Sunday. But it's like, then I have to remember, like, they're families too, right? Sure. Sometimes they want to spend time with their family. So, like, it puts you in a weird thing. But the other thing about the world spinning as fast as it is communication happens just as fast nowadays.
It's definitely not word of mouth. I mean, it is still word of mouth to a point, but it's super easy to hop online and
that's what I was
throw
saying.
Something out there. It's immediate.
Word of mouth is a lot mouthier.
There you go. Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Because you can have poor things to say, and sometimes you don't have to have any merit behind it, and you don't have to tell your side of the story.
Right.
And that's what I think hurts you the most, is I think people today are so willing to slash or bash somebody, but they're not going to share their side, what they did wrong.
Right. Yep.
It's easy to get the one side, and then the problem is society in general, we latch onto it, right? Like, oh my God, this guy said this. Like, well, what's the other side of the story?
Zero accountability.
Zero. So bad reviews often can happen because you spent too little on something,
Correct.
You can lose a contract. You might not get that contract back. You might lose a bid because of something they know of, right? So there's expensive problems that come along with cheap solutions. The other thing is it's that ongoing expense, because in my case, I bought a fuel pump fails. Now I still got to go buy a fuel pump, right? So
Yep.
not only did I not really save any money, but now I got to buy twice. So buy once, cry once kind of a deal, right? So in this case, I'm going to buy twice.
Buy your second fuel pump the first time.
Right, buy your second fuel pump the first time. I made a comment to my buddies when I was in the pits and we were putting the new fuel pump on. I said, we're going to do it nice because we're going to do it twice. And it's the truth. Because
They were thrilled, weren't they?
They were not. They thought it was stupid. But it's the truth. It's the same investment twice. You're not expanding your business. Or in my case, my program isn't getting better. I'm doing the same work twice now. It's annoying. And so I think when you consider high quality parts, high quality equipment, high quality processes, yeah, they might cost you a little bit more upfront. But a cheap price without quality is just a cheap product. Right? You have to have some value behind your purchase. And so there's a thing it's called good value, and then there's a thing that is cheap.
Yep.
And they're very different. And I think that's where people often get that wrong. Is otherwise, I mean, just a cheap price is nothing more than a cheap product with, no backing.
And I feel like it's probably worth a little bit of extra time to take a step back and look at the two, right? Like if you'd have taken a step back and thought through the process of getting your fuel pump, would you have bought the more expensive? Just to go back to that example,
100%.
I mean, it's an easy one to go back to. You'd look at it and be like, you know what? Yeah, it's a few $100 more, but you know what? This one's going to last.
It's funny how after, like, hindsight's 2020, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's easy how, like, it's an obvious decision.
Yep.
Like, Brandon, would you buy that fuel pump? What would you do? Hands down, I'd buy the other fuel pump. Because it's obvious. But, like, had that fuel pump not failed,
Yep.
do I not, what if it lasted a year? Do I look down on it the same now?
No,
Maybe not,
You
right?
might go buy the same one again.
Correct, because I'm like, oh, well, it wasn't that bad of a decision. And that's the problem, is sometimes it can be deceiving.
Yep.
You get lucky, and suddenly you get lucky with a purchase. So then you start to think, I should do that with all of my purchases, and eventually it snowballs into a much worse situation.
And I think, too, at the same time, it has the opposite effect, too, right? And like in the future, you're going to look at things, looking back on that experience and be like, hey, maybe I should go this route this time and spend a little more money because I don't want to go through that again.
It's amazing the results of your decision can tailor the future decisions.
Right.
Because now my failure there has led me to buy the more quality part the first time and just don't risk it, because I'll always remember that. But if it had been the opposite, if I'd gone out and won that race, well, man, I'm not going to buy that more expensive stuff. I don't know.
Right.
It depends on how it happens. But I mean, I think you have to think about the future and where you're going with it. And sometimes it's just the material you're buying to build your parts, right? Like, what quality of steel do I use in the machine makes a difference on the quality of the machine I'm going to build. Mm-hmm. The quality of the lumber that you're purchasing might, make a difference on how good the home is that you're building. And so there's things that you have to think about outside of just, equipment. I'm using equipment because that's what we do. But, how do you spend smart and not cheaply, right? Like, let's talk about that for a second. Like, how to spend smart, not cheap, is a real thought that you have to consider, because when you compare costs, are you being cheap? No. Right? You're doing your due diligence, right? We should always consider the cost of ownership, right? Not just the price. And when I say that is, when you look at two prices on paper, that's not a bad place to start. Let's understand. But when you just simply look at two prices on paper and then instantly stop looking at the most expensive one, you're cheap.
Right.
You're cheap because you haven't given the most expensive one to show you value.
Well, and I think too, like, use a cabinet maker as an example. Like, if they can charge the same price but use a cheaper material, thinking that somebody's not going to know the quality of it later, is that good business, or is it better business to spend the money on the quality materials and charge the people accordingly in order to protect, like, your, like we talked about, your public word. What word am I looking for? Reputation. There you go. Yeah. One of them big words we talked about earlier.
Yeah. Too bad it's over 9 letters. I can't talk about it. You bring a good point up there, because consider that for a second there. Okay. So if I use cheap quality parts, but I know that I can charge the same as you who are using a higher quality part, and only thing you look at is the price, how much quality do you suddenly lose?
Right. Because
you don't ask the questions because you were focused on price. Now I recognize that I make more profit. You get less of a you get less profit because you have to be more See those dang long letter words.
That was only 5 orders.
That was only 5 that time. But no, you get less profit as a business because you're using more expensive.
Correct.
And you're still not getting the business. Me, I'm getting the business with cheap parts. I'm making more profit.
Yep.
But now in the long run, my parts start to fail.
Yep.
Right?
And they come back to you and be like, well, you need to replace this. Because
correct. So now my margin starts to drop because I have to redo this.
Eventually it's going to catch up.
Exactly. And that's what I was going to say is eventually you lose. So it's like you're better to just, as the customer, spend on a quality, right?
Yes.
It's not always about price. And I'm not saying just because it's more expensive, it makes it better. Value is value. And that's where you got to look at it as cost of ownership. What is it going to cost me, not today, but in a year from now? What does the support look like? What happens if I need to train somebody new on this software or whatever it is you're buying? How does that happen? What does that cost me? What happens if something fails or breaks? How hard is it to get a replacement? What is the process? Like those things matter because it's cost of ownership. And so there's more than just the cost of the investment, but it's also the long-term repair costs and your training and your support and all the things that go along with it. Or what's the install time look like, right? If you're buying cheap cabinets, well, how hard is it to put these together? And we've all had the experience of buying IKEA furniture.
Yes.
It's cheap, but I think I can speak for every dad out there. It's the worst thing in the world to have to put together on a Saturday afternoon.
I can think of a lot of other things I like to do with the 6 hours of my time putting it together.
Yeah, for sure. And you're always missing the last dowel pin.
Right.
But it's my point is you have to look at the cost of an investment. And when you invest in equipment, you're investing really in growth. I mean, nobody buys equipment with the idea that they're going to get smaller.
Right.
Yes. That's generally not the concept. So your growth in your business is what you're investing in. And so invest in equipment that grows your business, right?
Absolutely.
And that's scalable. You don't want to just buy something one-dimensional. I'm going to buy this sliding saw, and the only thing it does is it does the saw work, right?
So it makes this one aspect of our business quicker,
correct,
but doesn't help anywhere else.
A lot of times you look at the cost of some of this stuff now. I mean, some of the sliding saws out there now, and you start to look at them and you're like, man, I spent as much as I could have on a CNC machine, and the CNC machine is going to do pocketing and drilling and all the other things, MDF doors. So it's just crazy when you start to think about that. Think about scalability. Think about where you're going long term. That's a good way to spend smart. And then prioritize. Prioritize things like support. Prioritize things like training. It's the things outside of the price. Prioritize what you're going to get with the purchase. Is it what kind of software you're getting with it? How does the training work? How does the setup work? What about the shipping? Prioritize all the other value in your purchase because they're all going back to number one, the operational cost.
And obviously having those things be great are going to make your life easier as well, right? And make things just go smoother in general. If you know that you always have somebody that is going to help you if you get stuck or struggle or whatever, you're not just going to be like out in the middle of a lake and a boat with no oars.
Right. And that's exactly it. A great product is absolutely nothing without great support.
Right.
Because eventually someday you're going to have questions. You're going to need something. And if the person's not going to support it, just like your cabinets, if you're going to install the cabinets and then you're just going to never answer the phone again, it doesn't matter how great your cabinets are. If something goes wrong and they can't get a hold of you, they might as well have bought from a big box store.
For sure. Yep.
So, and I think that's the big thing that I take away from it is like when I buy from a big box store, I don't expect the same, I know there's a warranty that expires and they're going to just leave me high and dry.
And so, even if it's still under warranty, you're going to have to fight and struggle and go through a battle to get it fixed.
Yeah.
It's pretty much just...
We both know how that goes. It's not a very fun experience when you're trying to get something taken care of outside of warranty.
You're going to end up just going and buying a new one.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's
not dealing with, it's not worth the time and energy.
Right. So the big thing that I take away is cutting corners obviously often feels like you're saving money up front. You feel like you're in a good spot. But the reality of it is it's often you're getting less for your investment and it's going to end up being more expensive someday.
For sure.
You might not notice it today and you feel like you won, but you're a lot of times going to find when you feel like you lost.
You're going to be spending more money fixing it and updating it and upgrading and doing all that stuff. It's going to end up being more.
Correct. And, smart investments in quality equipment, technology, people, training, whatever, always pays off. Like having quality will never be I've never heard somebody buy something and say the quality's too good.
Yeah, that'd be silly.
You know what I'm saying? It's not a thing that you ever regret. Nobody's ever been like, man, I really shouldn't have got the quality. It's just not something you do. So if you're serious about, long-term growth in your business and success, I think you have to be serious about value. And you have to consider cheap purchases, cheap prices often are cheap products.
Yes.
And that's something you have to think about. So obviously, ShopSabre, if you're in the market for CNC machines, go to our website. I feel like we fit the mold really well with a high value driven, purchase. We put more into the support, into the after sales stuff. So check us out. If you haven't checked us out, ShopSabre.com. Obviously, our website's got lots of stuff for you to play around with. We'd love to hear your story. Tell us about things in your business. Tell us, about a time that you've cut a corner and found out the hard way. You've heard my fuel pump story. I'd love to hear your story. Like, what's your aha moment, right? We've all had them. I'd also love to hear what do you do for your customers that has worked well for you? What's something that you think is a backbone or a staple to your company that really makes them, people come back to you. So I love to hear it. I mean, I think it's a great way for us to have a conversation. So, leave it in the comments, shoot us an email, whatever. Send us a pigeon message. MySpace. Send Tom a message.
Tom,
your first friend.
all this talk about corners really made me think of something funny.
Okay.
Like all winter long, my kids complain about it's cold in the house.
Right.
Because I keep the thermostat at like 68.
Yep.
I just tell them to go stand in the corner. It's always 90 degrees.
Get out of here. Get out of here. If you guys like this, obviously, like us, subscribe to us. We appreciate you guys tuning in every week.
Send us your favorite dad joke. Maybe you'll get it on the podcast.
That would be fun. Yeah, start telling other people's dad jokes.
Yeah.
But motivational quote for you guys this week, something I want you guys to keep in mind is the time will pass regardless of what you do. You might as well make the time worth it. So something just to think about. Time's going to pass regardless of what you're doing. You might as well make the time worth it. So,
yes.
With that, obviously, thanks for tuning in to Talkin Shop this week. We're going to be back at it with another episode next week. Hopefully you'll tune in with us. Share this with your friends. Make sure you follow us. But as always, I'm Brandon.
And I'm Nick.
Thanks again for Talkin Shop. Until next time.